was a little bit earlier, a couple hours ago, we enshrined the ashes of Tansuriko's father downstairs in our little shrine room. Did some paritta chanting. And his father just passed away late December. And just got back from the memorial services and brought the ashes with him. So yeah, this dying thing happens, and these are very, very notable, important times of our human existence to take note of, reflect on. These bardos, the Tibetan tradition refers to the bardos. I didn't know much about it. I still don't know much about the teachings from that, but used to think of it as just those transition periods after death, before the next rebirth. But as I read a little bit about it, it actually refers to pretty much all of our stages of cycles of existence within samsara. So there's the death bardo and the birth bardo, and actually this present lifetime is a bardo, and it sort of has this quality of just movement, momentum, and transition. And but the death bardo is a significant one. The birth one is as well. And so, yeah, we take note of these times and reflect on the qualities of being a human being and what it is that we live with and die with, and try and make some sense of it and try and understand how we can create difficulties around things, or how we can learn to release ourselves, release our minds, release our hearts into a sense of less suffering and more freedom. People often think of birth as kind of one of these joyous events, and death is one of these tragic events. That's often how it's framed in our consciousness. But it's not obviously so simple. I think if you were to be able to communicate with a little newborn baby who just got expelled from 9 months of swimming around in some nice warm, dark, quiet space, and all of a sudden bursting out into the worlds of sights, sounds, and painful tactile sensations, and hunger and thirst, that they may not be quite as cheerful as everybody else is. But certainly these endpoints, the beginning and the end points, are places where we take notice of particularly of the difficulties and the stress that it causes, particularly at the time of death. And also just reflecting in the human condition anyway, that the in-between bardo isn't a piece of cake either for most of us. It's certainly got some very good things and certainly some great potentials in the human existence. But I don't think that all of us who are here tonight, living in the monastery, or having come from near and far away, have an illusion that everything is just wonderful in our lives. Otherwise, we probably would be out partying on a Saturday night rather than coming to the monastery. So we have some inkling of wanting to explore and wanting to understand the difficulties of life, and how we can turn them into wisdom, turn them into understanding as a way of lessening the difficulties. And there's all sorts of ways that we experience the world, but we've been talking about in our winter retreat teachings that we've just been picking up on a daily basis. We're focusing on some aspects of our experience, the 8 qualities of a very well-regarded or a very auspicious human being. Some of the 8 qualities of a great being we're reflecting on, and we've just started that and have been talking about the quality of modesty and kind of moving into areas of things like praise and blame and reputation and disrepute as the worldly winds that are in association with that, how we always want to seek looking good in the world and receiving praise and adulation and having a good reputation as being a foundation for maybe immodesty, and how looking to see how our minds react to those particularly worldly winds and how we can create difficulty around that. And so it brings up questions about how we can be in the world in a more effective way and negotiate the winds of old age, sickness, death. I was kind of given a little bit of a worldly reminder of things like wanting to avoid blame or wanting to avoid any kind of criticism. Oddly enough, this past couple of months or so, I realized that I should be, now that I'm 63 years old, be looking into Social Security, of all things. I worked long enough in my lay life to qualify for that, and even though as a monastic, I don't receive money or use money, can't accept it, can't spend it, can't make decisions really about what to do with it in a very direct way. But realizing that there was an entitlement here to this Social Security, thought, well, the monastery could probably use it. The steward, Sangapala Foundation, could probably make good use of an extra $1,000 a month or so. So even though it's not of use to me personally, I thought, well, maybe you should try and figure out a way to get it to be offered to the monastery. It took a little bit of finagling with how to do that without taking ownership of it myself and directing it in any way, just appointing the monastery essentially as the recipient or the steward to do it, and finally figured out the way to make it happen so that it wasn't in violation of our precepts. But put in my online application a few weeks ago and got an email notice saying that I was going to have to be interviewed on the phone by a Social Security representative. And these kind of perceptions started to come up of they're wanting to find out why it is that I haven't worked for the past 23 years. There's no record of earnings for 23 years, even though I had a good 20 plus years of earnings before that qualified me. And all the suspicions of somebody's probably going to try and fault me for not working, find out why I hadn't been working. It seemed very suspicious. And the old tapes of, sometimes we get here in the West, we get criticized as monastics because it's pretty poorly understood in many areas what monasticism is all about, get kind of tagged as being sort of a freeloader, somebody who's not pulling their weight, not earning money, doing an honest job. So those kind of tapes were playing in my head when I thought, oh, I'm going to be interviewed by this Social Security worker and put to the test about this. And so I got this, set up this phone interview with Ms. Johnson, was her name, and she was going to be calling within 24 to 48 hours, and so I was needing to keep an eye on the phone to pick up any messages and call her back as soon as possible. And so we have this outgoing phone message that talks about our winter retreat. It says, you've reached the Abhayagiri Buddhist Monastery. We are currently on winter retreat, and if you have an urgent message or urgent business, please leave a message, and we'll get back to you. So I just happened to be in between walking and sitting meditation yesterday, I think it was yesterday afternoon, or maybe the day before, and saw that the message light had lit up. And I thought, oh, well, maybe that's this call that I need to get. And I checked the message, and it had just come in about 10 minutes earlier. So I thought, oh, this will be a good time to call back, and I did, and got a hold of Ms. Johnson and was preparing myself for this, this interview and tough questions and why haven't you been working and what have you been doing with your life, kind of a thing. and she answered, and I said, oh, this is Glenn Demaria, that's my lay name. This is Glenn Demaria. You called to ask some questions about my Social Security application. And she said, oh, yes. You called back awfully quickly, she said. And then I didn't say anything, and she said, aren't you supposed to be on retreat? And I just laughed. And I said, well, yeah, that's right. Oh, I said, you picked up the phone message. You heard that on the phone message. And she said, yes. And then she said, are you a monk? And I thought, oh, okay, well, I wonder what's coming from this one. And I said, yes, I am. By the way, yeah, I am. And she went, awesome. And funny, another worker that I had talked with a few weeks ago said the same thing. She used the same word. She said, oh, you're a monk, awesome. So that kind of melted my whole perceptual realm of praise and blame. And she said, oh, I just have a few questions, and completely contrary to her trying to trip me up on why I hadn't been working for the past 20 years and was I a freeloader on the world. She was saying, well, I just have a few questions from a long time ago. She says, you may not be able to remember this, but we're just trying to get you the best benefits you can, and there's some discrepancies here, and we might be able to get you a little bit more than, than what it looks like here if you can answer these questions. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is a U.S. government worker trying to give me more money. So it was great. It was a great little perceptual shift. And she did indeed ask me questions that I couldn't remember the answer to from places I worked in 1981 and things like that. But we had a nice conversation, and she ended it with well, I'll let you get back to your retreat now. I don't want to take any more of your time away from that. So that was a great interlude in that afternoon. But it was interesting because it brought up a lot of memories. One of the questions she was asking was about a place I had worked in the late 80s, a place called Rose Hedge House in Seattle, which was the first residential treatment, or a hospice, I guess it really was mostly a hospice, residential care facility for people with AIDS. And it was kind of right during the height of the onslaught the AIDS crisis, before all the antivirals started taking effect. They were around, but were just beginning to be used. And so things were pretty intense. And it just, that reference and talking about that place and my work there with this Social Security person brought up a whole lot of memories of what illness and sickness and the suffering in human life can really be all about. Because it was a messy time. There was a lot of young people, mostly young people that I worked with, a few older people, but mostly young, who were experiencing all of these really horrible illnesses, things that were scary and unknown and or very rarely seen, and just a very quick progression of the disease, watching bodies rapidly deteriorate, almost literally before your eyes, and the emotional devastation that people will go through too, with this kind of very intense physical pain and discomfort, and just the letting go of friends and family within a very short period of time. As a hospice nurse, you kind of like to have these longer periods of time drawn out, plenty of time to prepare for, help people get their minds around it and start coping with the fact that their end of life is coming. And there often wasn't that opportunity in this situation to have that luxury of that kind of leisurely dying period to explore these things. In the hospice field, we used to call them crash and burn situations, and just so fast and so intense, physically and emotionally. And just the human body and watching it deteriorate was in ways of strong fuel for my growing interests in Dhamma practice. We do what we call the Asubha reflections in part of our practice now. Oftentimes also like the 32 parts of the body recitation is a reflection that we practice with to try and demystify, in a sense, the human body and how we hold it in our minds, how we hold it in our experience, and to see it more clearly for what it is by examining the various solids and fluids of the body, the 32 parts, and usually it starts with the reflection on the first 5 parts of the body, which are what are generally considered to be the external body parts: the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. As an initial reflection, this is what we see when we look at the human body. Look at our human body from the outside. And the other parts tend, all the other organs and liquids are the internal aspects. But with that, working with the rapidly deteriorating body of somebody with the HIV virus and the full-blown AIDS, there was a whole lot more of those body parts on the outside than just the 5. And starting to see all the various unbeautiful aspects of the body in full force, seeping through all sorts of openings, and the natural openings and unnatural openings, acquired openings, tubes and insertions and liquids coming out and going in, and it's just real eye-opening, mind-opening. So this is all part of the contemplation of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life, of samsara, the round of birth, life, and death. And we were talking about dukkha. I can't remember, some sort of discussion. Maybe it was midnight tea last week, or maybe one of the reading discussions during the day. But somebody asked the question to myself and to Ajahn of how is it that, as you go along, you measure whether there's some growth in the practice or growth from the teachings that you personally experience. How do you recognize that? How do you measure that? And my initial response was, well, as I thought about it, just a lessening of the experience of dukkha, a gradual lessening of the experience of dukkha. And Ajahn Yanako's response was, well, actually, he felt that it was actually a greater experiencing of dukkha, experiencing more of the aspects of dukkha that was a sign of progress. And I didn't respond right away, but I thought about it more, the fact that we came up with what seems like on the surface two completely opposite answers to how we measure growth in the practice. And as I thought about it, I thought, actually both are correct, because there are different forms of dukkha. And certainly there's the dukkha of the conditions, the world around us, the unsatisfactoriness that's inherent in human existence. There are certain things that are just incontrovertible in terms of unpleasant, difficult experience. Birth is dukkha. Having a human body subject to pain, having a human mind subject to disappointment, change. These are things that are inherent in the world around us, and they are dukkha. They can cause difficulty, obstruction, and by and large, they're just part of being a human being, and that's a kind of dukkha that we start to experience more and see more when we stop avoiding it, when we stop shutting our minds around it, stop trying to get away from it. So in that sense, the more we experience the practice, the more we see that we need to look squarely at that kind of dukkha and accept it for what it is. And in that sense, we do experience the realm of dukkha more acutely. And then there's also the dukkha that comes with resistance to the first kind. And that as we open ourselves to that and eliminate or reduce that resistance to the unpleasant, difficult, painful aspects of life, then we are actually starting to lessen the dukkha that we experience, that second kind of dukkha, which is the dukkha of the Four Noble Truths, the dukkha that we have some ability to control our experience of. So there are these different kinds of dukkha, and we, as the practice progresses, we experience more deeply and penetrate more deeply some kinds of dukkha, and don't close ourselves off to it. And in that way, we experience less dukkha through less resistance and less avoidance of the difficult aspects of life, so that we don't add that second kind on top of the kind that's inherent within existence. And the teachings on dukkha, we recite them pretty much every morning, almost every morning in the chanting that we do, the morning chanting, the causes of dukkha. And as we all know, the basic ones are dukkha. Is found when we don't get what we want, and when we do get what we don't want. Various other formulations along those lines, and then basically summed up as dukkha is found within the five aggregates of our being, the five aggregates affected by clinging. So the five aggregates of our experience, of our personal experience of having a body as being the first aggregate, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness being the four other aggregates that are more mind-related. That when these aggregates, what we normally think of as in some form or fashion or composite as being who we are, how we define ourselves, when we hold on to those in some way, seeking satisfaction or seeking security or seeking continuity, holding them with a sense of me, myself, who I am. When it's held in that way, with that upadana, with that clinging, that is dukkha. So the task, as we know, is to start to really examine how it is that we cling, how we hold, and how we can start to turn around that process through wisdom and relinquishment and release and letting go, knowing and letting go of that holding, that clinging to these various aspects of our experience. So this forms the bulk of our daily practice. We practice with our meditation to still the mind, to calm the mind. And we don't keep it at that, though. I mean, that's a lovely experience that we encourage ourselves and others to develop in and of itself. It's a harmless and actually very useful, pleasant experience. But we use that to really contemplate these five aggregates and how we hold on to them in a way that causes this dukkha that we don't have to experience. So we look at the body, we look at form, we look at it with honesty. We look at the different components. We see how we get enchanted by certain aspects of it. We see how desire can take hold of our attention, direct it to those things which are pleasing, and avoid those things which are more displeasing or difficult to see. Selective attention process in a way to support this illusion of the body as a vehicle for satisfaction. And we watch that process, and we learn how to see this human form, this human body experience with more balance by letting ourselves see what is not so pleasant, not so alluring, not so enticing about the human form, and to see it as it changes so that we aren't caught by surprise when we experience illness or when something unfortunate happens or when there's an unexpected death or messy kind of illness, and all of a sudden we're looking at things that we've never seen before or turned away from, and that the suffering that causes. So with that kind of understanding and that sobering look at this human body just in and of itself as something that is a very useful tool for us for reflection, we honor it for its usefulness in that way, and we take care of it as best we can. But we don't suffer any illusions about it. We don't get fooled into thinking of it as a refuge for either pleasant experience or a sense of security. And in that way, we reduce the clinging to it. We still experience it, and we appreciate it for what it can be used for. We look after it, but we don't get wrapped up in it with unrealistic expectation. Examine the feelings, contemplating the feelings of the body, the pleasant feelings, the unpleasant feelings, and the neutral ones. And we watch and see how the mind gets pulled around by just those experiences of pleasant and unpleasant, how we constantly, in small ways or big ways, the mind lurches towards increasing the pleasant and tries to avoid the unpleasant, gets caught in resistance to the unpleasant. And how the mind just keeps on ping-ponging back and forth with that. And how both of those are really a form of craving and clinging, even the unpleasant ones that we have resistance to, that we don't want to feel, the difficult, painful experiences of body and mind. By virtue of our resistance to it, establishes a kind of a karmic connection to unpleasant experience by that turning away from, that running away from, that avoidance. We actually, in some ways, bring it closer to us by that kind of avoidance. In the same way that we glom onto and attach to and try and hold to the pleasant things that we do experience. And then when that changes, it turns into a painful one. And if we're holding on to it when it's pleasant, it's going to be right there with us when it turns and changes into painful. So we watch this, we get to know this process and learn how to release that grip, to release the grasp, and so that we still experience pleasant sensation. We can notice and enjoy a pleasing, beautiful sight or a sound or a meal of some sort, and we start to learn to do that without holding on and realizing that just in that moment it is just as it is arising, it is passing away. It's still pleasant, and then it changes. And the same with unpleasant. We view it with that sense of more equanimity, so that we say, oh yes, this is an unpleasant feeling, this is a painful feeling in the body or a painful emotional state of mind. And we hold it gently and we hold it lightly and release the grip. And while it's still persistent, we know that it's unpleasant, and it's certainly not something we're wanting to have, but we don't enter into resistance. And then we watch it as it changes and as it subsides and it moves into neutral or pleasant feeling. So that sense of not clinging to that aggregate of feeling allows us to release, not to grasp, not to hold onto these changing experiences, and to just move with them as they move from pleasant to unpleasant to neutral and back and forth. A sense of balance and peace. Perceptions, so easy to get caught into fixed perceptions. We kind of program, in a sense, our world around us based on these fixed ideas, particularly in relationship to other people. We develop these fixed ideas of who each other is based on some experience, and hold on to that, attach to that, try and create some sort of sense of stability, even if it's an unpleasant one. We can have fixed ideas, fixed perceptions of people we like. You see that person coming down or coming into your room, and a sense of, oh, this is somebody I like. They've said nice things to me before. They've done nice things for me. This is a good person. And we fix a perception around that, and then something changes. Maybe this friend or this good person is having a bad day or has said seen something that you've done that's been displeasing, and they remark on it, and all of a sudden this perception changes, and this is not a nice person anymore. This person who used to be your best friend is now this incredibly insensitive being who just ruined your day. And how we hold on to that, grasp onto that perception, and don't see that as part of the changing nature of experience. So we work to not cling so tightly to these ideas and realize that we and the people around us and the situations in the world around us are not fixed. And if we can reduce our clinging, reduce our grasping, in that attempt to have stability, to have security in our perceptual world, then we can just be with that constant flow more easily of enemies becoming friends, friends becoming enemies, perceptions of people constantly changing. The Social Security interviewer who was going to try and trip me up, all of a sudden becoming somebody who was inspired by a monk on a meditation retreat. How quickly those experiences change when we just don't hold to perceptions like that. So not clinging to the perceptions and the mental formations, the ways that we automatically respond and program and create the mental world around us based on these fixed perceptions, the ways we reinforce them through unwise attention to those, those unpleasant aspects that we expect to see in somebody. We are programmed to sort those out, to ferret those out, and to reinforce our fixed perception. We just, in that constant motion of creating the world around us through fixed ways of thinking that reinforce the whole stability of the world, for better or for worse. And then the whole consciousness aggregate, this constant motion of awareness amongst the six sense bases, sights and sounds and tastes and tactile sensations and smells and thoughts, in the intellect, the conceptual world, that constant weaving of moment to moment shifting of attention to create this sense of continuity of experience, the world around us. And watching the clinging that comes up with that, the holding to that, trying to hold on to that stability of a world that makes sense by constantly weaving together the moments of consciousness that we have. It all rapidly happening so fast that we don't see the flickering of that consciousness. It becomes one constant motion of experience, blurring together to create a semblance of a stable reality. But we can pick that apart too. We can look at the bases, look at the ways that we experience sights and sounds, all the experiences from the sense bases, the consciousness associated with them, and learn not to cling on to them so tightly. Watching the way that they dart around all the time, the way that they constantly pull and drag our attention because of our lack of groundedness, our lack of grounding of our attention. There's a great sutta that it has some lovely images of describing the six sense bases in terms of some animals, the six animals that used in this simile, a monkey, a crocodile, a dog, a jackal, a snake, and a bird. the Buddha gives a simile of suppose that you take these 6 animals and tie a rope to each of them, and then grab the ends of the rope and tie them all together in a knot so that they're essentially all tied together, but with a rope coming from a central knot. And then you release that knot, and all of the animals, the various 6 animals, try and are struggling to get to their home base, so that the crocodile is trying to get back to the water, and the monkey is trying to get back to the forest, the dog is trying to get back to the village, the jackal is trying to get back to the charnel ground, the burial ground where there's the dead bodies, the snake is trying to get back to the anthill, the bird is trying to fly back up to the sky. And they're all trying to get back to their home base, yanking and pulling. And one will weaken, or some of them will weaken, and the strong one will appear, and it'll yank in one direction and pull the whole group in one direction, and then they'll tire out, and another one will take over and start pulling towards their direction until they tire out, and then another one will take over from that point and pull in their direction. And it just keeps on going back and forth like this, one dominant over the group until they tire out, and then another one takes over. And the simile is that of the 6 senses, that constantly the sights and sounds and tastes and tactile sensations and smells and ideas and thoughts are constantly vying for our attention and yanking us around, pulling us from one place to another based on the strength of the desire, the strength of that experience. And we're just constantly being pulled by these 6 sense bases in one direction or another. And that if you take that group of animals and the rope and tie it together to a central pillar that's firmly implanted in the ground, and fasten it there, then sure, the 6 animals will start to pull and tug, but after a little bit of time, they'll realize that they're not going anywhere. And with that ground post there, they will settle down and just rest where they are in place without struggling anymore when there's tied to that central pillar. And in the same way, we can reduce the chaotic activity of the 6 sense bases, of the pulling us from one thing to another, with grounding ourselves, grounding our attention with mindfulness immersed in the body. So this is the Buddha's injunction for us to develop mindfulness of the body, and as a way of grounding these 6 sense bases. So this is one of the antidotes for this kind of attachment to the illusion of consciousness, as if we can ground ourselves in the mindfulness related to the body, then it provides a central core for us to slow down and to be able to really know our experience, and to know when it is we're getting pulled here and there based on greed, hatred, delusion. And this can lead to a real strong sense of calming the chaos of the mind, calming the ways that we get yanked around with greed, hatred, and delusion, and that clinging, that attachment to the whole conscious experience starts to settle down. We see it more clearly, we loosen our attachment to the whole realm of conscious experience. So the amelioration of this kind of suffering, this additional form of suffering that's caused by clinging, we explore that in our meditation, in our experience, in our daily life, how we're attaching, clinging to the body, the different kinds of feelings and perceptions and the mental world, the programs, the ideas, and even our conscious experience. And we loosen the grip. We loosen the grip so that we aren't just constantly involved in trying to find the pleasant, trying to avoid the unpleasant, and missing most of experience through lack of clarity. And as we see that, as we loosen the grip of that clinging and hold things more clearly with equanimity, we start to see how we don't really have to have that second layer of dukkha through this form of attachment and this form of clinging, that we still experience the world, but without that expectation of stability, of permanence, of that being a true refuge, and the mind just becomes disenchanted with doing it that way because it sees the futility. And with that disenchantment, there's a settling into a much deeper place of stillness and of peace that comes with a much greater sense of clarity. And that there's this change of reference point from finding that stability in the body and in the mind to dwelling in that sense of stable awareness, that knowing quality of mind that isn't pulled in all sorts of directions, looking for a peace that can't be found in the ever-changing world. And resting in that sense of relinquishment, resting in that sense of letting go, resting in that quality of non-becoming, not creating the world around us, not creating ourselves in relation to the world around us. And then just that backing off from that entanglement, disentanglement from these experiences that we identify with so strongly. And what the Buddha says is that if we follow that path of relinquishment, release, letting go, disentanglement to the fullest, then there is this promise of full and complete liberation from suffering. So we have the various practices to help us with that, the various contemplations, the stilling of the mind, the meditation, the reflections that we engage with on a regular basis, the teachings, the good company of like-minded practitioners, and this very, very important time of winter retreat to really settle into it, to use it, and to make the most of it. So I think I'll leave it there for this night's reflection.